evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Victory Gardens University gardening series. This week, we will be discussing in more detail pest management for home gardeners, a very timely discussion since the increase in the rains, which we all welcome, has brought with it an increase in pests. A special welcome this evening to the participants of the Let's Grow Together Challenge, who are about to enter into their third week of the challenge. The challenge is another initiative of Victory Gardens, which aims to improve food security by encouraging Barbadian households to grow their own food. For those of us who are joining us for the first time, allow me to introduce ourselves. Victory Gardens Caribbean is an urban farming and food security company dedicated to empowering homes and communities with the skills, knowledge, products, and services to become more food secure, economically sustainable, and healthier by growing their own food at home. The Victory Gardens University is an educational platform dedicated to helping homes to move from consumers to producers by growing their own food and making delicious meals and creating new agricultural products. This evening, I'm very excited to introduce to you Mr. Ian Gibbs. He's an entomologist and senior agricultural officer with the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. Gibbs has been working in the field of entomology, and for those of you who are not sure what that is, I had to Google it myself. It is he is a scientist who studies insects. So he's been working in the field of entomology since 1978, initially at the Barbados Sugar Industry Limited Entomology Laboratory, then with the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, and currently as a senior agricultural officer and head of the entomology section at the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. He holds a BSc in Natural Sciences and an MPhil in Biology with an emphasis on entomology. Mr. Gibbs has also done several courses in different areas of entomology, including biological control, pest management, insecticide resistance, detection and management, applied taxonomy of insects and mites of agricultural importance, tropical pastures entomology, crop improvement with special reference to pigeon pea entomology, and DNA-based detection of plant pathogens and strategies and technologies for environmentally friendly agriculture in the United Kingdom, India, Colombia, and Israel. He has also worked on a large number of insect pests on sugarcanes, vegetables, root crops, forages, turf grass, fruit trees, ornamentals for over 40 years. So he's more than qualified to speak to us this evening. And for a number of years, he concentrated on biological control. He has authored and co-authored over 75 scientific papers, articles, fact sheets, and other publications, and is a member of the Pesticide Control Board's Technical Subcommittee. He's also a member of the Barbados Horticultural Society's Committee of Management, and he has twice chaired CARICOM's Caribbean Plant Health Directors Forum and represented Barbados on its technical working groups on giant African snails, there's a word I can't pronounce, tephtride, fruit flies, plant pests for many years. He has mentored the McGill University and UWI BITS students and taken part in numerous radio and television programs focusing on agriculture in general and plant pest control in particular. He has also cooperated with other scientists in the UK, the US, the Caribbean on the control of a range of insects and mollusk pests, and received the 1991 and 1995 Ministry of Agriculture and FAO World Food Day Awards in recognition of his outstanding contribution to agriculture. So just before I hand us over to Mr. Gibbs, which we're very excited to have with us this evening, just a couple quick housekeeping matters. We ask that you please keep your mic on mute throughout the session. If you have any questions, please type them in the comments box and we will go through those questions. I will read through those questions at the end of Mr. Gibbs' presentation so that we can have as a productive a session as possible. So without further ado, I hand it over to Mr. Ian Gibbs.
Thank you very much, Amelia. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and to share with you a bit of my experience in dealing with these little beasties that we call pests that you might find in your garden over the years. And without any further ado, then I would like to get started into the presentation. When you come across these pests that you see in your garden, basically, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, and you're seeing the presentation?
Yes, we're seeing your presentation, yes.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, these types of pests fall mainly into 2 or 3 categories, and the majority of which are usually found in garden situations are what we refer to as sucking pests. And as this name suggests, these pests suck the sap or juice from the plant, from the leaves, from stems, from the fruit, and so forth, and cause significant problems. And examples of these are things like scale insects, mealybugs, whiteflies, aphids, thrips, and mites. And I'll go through each of these in the presentation so that you'll have an idea of what I mean. Now, other things that can be pests in your garden are things like leaf miners, midges, which is a type of fly, moth and beetle borers. These are insects that actually bore into the plant itself and cause problems. Then things like snails, like giant African snail, for example, and slugs. Okay? Now, basically, there are about 3 methods that are used to control these pests. Now, firstly, it's mechanical control, which means you go around hand picking the pests off your plants. And this is okay if you have a small garden. But if your garden extends to, say, an acre or more, that becomes not so feasible, right? So you have to look at other means of control. Now, the next type of control is what we refer to as biological control, which means that it uses the pest's own natural enemies. These are other insects and other arthropods that are present in the environment, which will either feed upon the pests or parasitize them and control them. Okay, and this type of control is one that I tend to favor because it's natural. It doesn't really have any adverse effect on the environment, nor you, the gardener. And in often many cases, it's self-sustaining. Okay, after you do the initial input, you really don't have to make any further changes or inputs into the system. It's virtually self-sustaining. And the third type of control that we look at is chemical control. In other words, we use different types of insecticides for the insects and things like molluscicides, which will control the mollusks like snails and slugs. Okay, and then that chemical control can be further divided into 2 broad areas: the use of synthetic insecticides or man-made insecticides, and those which occur naturally and which are referred to as organic insecticides or pesticides. All right. So we first turn to the area of sucking pests, which is one of the major categories. And these tend to proliferate in the dry season in particular, because there are parts of the sap that the pest will feed on and use them for their own growth and reproduction. And these parts of the sap in the host plants tend to be very high or much higher during the dry season than in the wet season. Okay. Also, there's no rain to wash the pests off the plants during the dry season, so they tend to remain there and do more damage. Now, the first example I put up for the sucking pests, it's a relatively new pest. It's been here about a little over 5 years or more, and it's called the croton scale. And the picture you will see there on your right of the screen shows a soursop, if you believe it, that is almost completely covered in these what appear to be small green bumps all over the surface. And these are the scale insect, which are tightly attached to the surface of the soursop and sucking the sap out of it. You will also notice that there are a number of ants, black ants, all over the soursop as well. And there's a reason for that, because when the pest sucks the sap from the plant, as I mentioned earlier, it only utilizes a certain part or parts of the sap, and the rest, what it does, it concentrates and it excretes. And it comes out as a sweet, sticky liquid, which we refer to as honeydew. And as most of you will know, ants are very much attracted to sugar. And this honeydew secreted by the pest contains a high proportion of sugar. So that is why you will see on your plants that are affected by these sucking pests, you will often see quite a few ants all over them. And I get many calls from persons saying that they have problems with these ants on their plants, and they want to know how to control them. But I tell them what you have to do is to look for the source of the problem, which is the sucking pest, right? And control that, right? If you simply try to just control the ants, then you're not attacking the basic problem, which is the sucking pest. If you look at the picture on your left, that is a croton leaf, and you will see all along the midrib are these green bumps. Those again are the croton scale, sucking the sap out of the croton leaf to get their nourishment. Now, another example of a scale insect, because there are numerous, there are very large numbers of them, different species, is a scale insect that goes on the sago palm. And a few years ago, this sago palm scale insect came into Barbados, and it killed hundreds and hundreds of these sago palms around the island. What again it does is it sucks the sap from the leaves, and when present in large numbers, the whole sago palm has a what you might term as a snowy or whitewashed appearance. You can see it in the top photograph there. Eventually, the leaves will turn brown and drop off. And these scales are usually present on all parts of the palm, including right down in the earth, as far as 2 feet or so. they will feed on the roots. All right, and the bottom picture shows what the scale looks like. The larger round ones are the females. The elongated white ones are the males, and those little small tiny sort of golden colored ones are the first stage of the pest, which is termed the crawler stage. As it hatches from the egg, it comes out into the crawler stage, and as that name implies, it crawls all over the plant and crawls to other plants to infest them. And when they find a suitable feeding area, they will insert their mouth part, which looks like a injection needle, into the plant tissue, and then begin to suck up the sap from the tissue of the plant. Now, what we did in the case of this particular pest is that we started a biological control program for it, and we went to Florida, which was having a problem with it as well, and collected 2 of its natural enemies. That's the natural enemy of the scale insect. And if you see them on the left part of the slide there, it's a tiny wasp, which is parasitizing the scale there. And what I should add is that this is a highly enlarging picture of the wasp. It is only about the size of a pinhead. And similarly, we collected a small predatory beetle, Cybocephalus. You can see it on the bottom slide there, again about the size of a pinhead. And we brought them back to Barbados and released them here and attempted a biological control program for them. And I must say that the wasp is now well established on the island. Not so much the beetle. The beetle initially had done very well, but for some reason, the population of that particular beetle declined drastically. And the scientists in Florida have also noticed that as well. And we really don't know why that is happening, but again, I would say that the wasp is well established and doing a pretty good job. Another example of these scale insects are scales that will infest coconuts, for example, and palms, called the coconut scale. And you will see here on the lower slide, it's a roundish sort of scale. And underneath the cover of the scale, you will see these other small, elongate looking like creatures, and there are the young of the scale. The top photograph will show an infestation, a colony of these scales on the coconut leaf. And again, what it does is sucks the sap from the leaves, makes the plant not as thrifty as it should be. You get the problems with the honeydew attracting the ants. And like with all of these sucking pests, you get a third problem, which is a black covering on the leaves and stems, which Bajans refer to as blight. Now, this blight, let me tell you how it really forms. If you remember the honeydew that I told you that is secreted by these sucking pests, when they secrete it and it goes onto the leaves and spreads out, it forms a thin film on the leaf. And you can often see it. It has a kind of a silvery appearance on the leaf. And if you touch it, it is very tacky or sticky. And this honeydew, which I mentioned, has a very high sugar content, spreads out on the leaf. And if you remember your early days of biology at school, fungi tend to grow and proliferate very well in media that contain a significant amount of sugar. So basically what you're seeing with this black blight on the leaves is really a complex of different types of fungi growing in this sweet honeydew layer that has been secreted by the pest. So again, like the ants, the scale insect is the primary problem of that black blight. So in order to get rid of it, you should attack the source of that problem, which is the sucking pest. I mean, there are fungicides that you can use to control the actual black blight fungus itself, but you're not, in that case, addressing the control of the primary cause, which is the sucking pest. Okay? Now, some things that you can use to control these scale insects. There are a variety of different types of systemic insecticides. For example, these are ones that actually will penetrate into the leaf or the plant part that the insect is feeding on, so that when the sucking pest sucks up the sap, it will take up a dose of that chemical and be killed. Alternatively, there are other types of pesticides that you can use, and there are a range of different types of oils, like horticultural oils, even your normal cooking oil, and soap, your dishwashing liquid, and a brew that I recommend almost on a daily basis to farmers and to backyard growers and so for the control of these sucking pests is a simple one. You can go in your kitchen, you get your dishwashing liquid, you mix up 2 teaspoons of the dishwashing liquid plus half a teaspoon of any cooking oil that you might have into 1 gallon of water, and you spray all over the plant, including underneath the leaves, because in many cases these sucking pests are underneath the leaf, right? And in many cases as well, when I have told people about these the use of these soap solutions and so forth, they say, yes, I heard you mention about this, and I tried it, but it didn't work. I said, well, that's strange. It usually does. So tell me how you applied it. And often a number of people would say, well, I mix up this solution, and I put in a little bit of soap and a little bit of oil or whatever, and I throw it on the plant. I said, throw it on the plant. Tell me, how you did do that? Well, I just throw it on the plant. I said, well, that's the reason why it isn't working, because you have to get it to where the insect problem is, which is in many cases underneath the leaf, right? And if you don't do that, then you're wasting your time. And you should know in particular that this particular soap and oil mixture that I just told you about works in 2 ways. One, it attacks the outer part of the insect, which is referred to as the exoskeleton, and begins to help to break it down. And also it acts as a suffocating agent as well. It gets into the breathing system of the insect and clogs it up. So it really attacks the pest in 2 different ways. As I said, it suffocates it, and it also breaks down the external skin or skeleton of the insect. And it works on a wide range of different pests, particularly the sucking pests. And the good thing about it is that it's cheap. It costs practically nothing to make. And You don't have to go and buy expensive pesticide from anywhere, or you don't have to expose yourself to pesticide. So it's a good alternative in the control of these various sucking pests that you can actually make at home and use, and can use as often as you like, because it's just simply some soap and oil. All right. Now, but I look a bit on some of the biological aspects of these, biological control aspects of these pests. And for example, the pest that we are now dealing with, the coconut scale, has a range of different natural parasitoids and predators that will help to keep it in check so that you don't need to do anything whatsoever. They're out there, present in the environment, naturally attacking the pest and controlling it for you. And in Barbados, when we look at the coconut scale, there are 4 species of very tiny wasps that will parasitize the coconut scale. And the slide here shows examples of them. There's, for example, a phytis. You see it parasitizing it on the top left-hand photo. Then you have things like Cocobius, Centrodora, and Encarsis species. Again, the bottom right-hand one. And I must mention here again that these parasitoids are very tiny, and often you don't see them when you go into your garden, because they, as I said, many of them will fit quite happily on the top of a pinhead. But they're very effective. And in addition to that, there are a number of predatory insects in the garden that will help you in addition to the parasitoids. And in Barbados, attacking this coconut scale that we are on right now, we have a range of predatory ladybird beetles. And you see them here in the slide. Things like Kylochorus and Cladis and Cryptolemus, Skimnus, Nephus, and so forth. And all of these actually bite into and chomp into and devour the various stages of the pest and help you to control it biologically. Okay? All right. Now, some other examples of scale insects that you will find on your crops, on your ornamentals and your fruit trees are things like soft green scale. You see it there on the top left. And that goes on a wide range of plants. Things like mussel scale, Lepidosaphes. You will often see that on plants like hibiscus, for example. Your top right, star scale. You see why you call it a star scale. It's shaped like a star, Vinsonia stellifera. And you see that quite often on mango leaves, right? And the bottom one is it looks often quite different from the rest of the scales that you might think of. And this looks like little horns, little white horns sticking off of the trunk or major portion of the plant. And this is one is called Crypticeria. And again, it's an example of a sucking pest, right? So there's a wide range of these different types of scale insects. And if you're not sure, let me say that if you're not sure what you're dealing with, you can give us a call at the Ministry of Agriculture at Graham Hall, and I'll give you the contact information later down. And or you can send us an email or a WhatsApp with pictures of the problem. Or even better, you can bring in a sample of the insects to us, or we can also come to your residence and look at it for you if you request. But I must say that someone has to be there at the residence when we come, We do not go on residences where there is no one present. Okay, now let's look at a different type of sucking pests, and many of you might know these. They're called mealybugs. And the reason why they're called mealybugs is that the insect body itself is covered in a white, waxy, mealy-looking substance, which helps to protect them from dehydration and in some cases from their natural enemies. And I put two examples here initially of the mealybugs that we have had dealings with over the years. And the top left one is the rather infamous pink hibiscus mealybug. Now, this came into the Caribbean in, I think, around the early or mid 1990s, and proceeded to cause hundreds of millions of US dollars in damage right across the region before it was brought under good control. So I want to stress here that although some of these insects are very small, they can cause very large amounts of damage, costing very large amounts of money. So the thing in most cases is to try to nip the problem in the bud. Do not wait until it gets almost out of hand before you start a program to control it. And as I said, if you do not know what you're dealing with, contact us at the Ministry of Agriculture, and we are there to help you identify it and suggest means and ways that you can control it. The bottom left drawing, I don't have a photo of it, shows another type of mealybug that we have dealt with over the years. It's called the pawpaw or papaya mealybug. And again, like the scales that we mentioned before, these mealybugs are sucking pests. They suck the sap from the plants and cause all sorts of retardation in the growth of the plant, curling and twisting of the leaves, spreading of the sticky honeydew, the formation of that black blight. And in some cases, they can also transmit diseases as well. Not human diseases, but plant diseases. And a third aspect too is that, for example, in the case of the pink hibiscus mealybug, the top left one, that has a toxic saliva. In other words, when it bites into and begins to suck the sap from the plant, it introduces a toxin from its saliva into the plant and causes all sorts of curling and twisting. Sometimes you might go and look at your hibiscus plants and you will see them all bunched up, the leaves all bunched together and tightly closed up, like almost in a rosette pattern. If you open it up, then most likely you will see the pink hibiscus mealybugs down in there feeding. And that toxic saliva from the mealybug has caused that rosetting and bunching and curling to be present on your hibiscus. Well, I spoke a little bit about this earlier, but this is an example here you will see of that black sooty mold, which is a byproduct, you would say, or a consequence of the feeding of a number of the sucking pests on your plants. Right? You can control it, as I said, with for example, a copper fungicide like Champion or Champ, but you are really only addressing the problem of the fungus per se. You're not addressing the root cause, which is the sucking pest. So you have to do that in order to control that blackening or black blight on the plants. Now, again, like with the scales that I mentioned above, there are a range of different types of biological control agents out there that are doing a good job in helping to control it. And in the case of the pink hibiscus mealybug, for example, the two main natural enemies are a very tiny wasp again called Anagyrus kamali, which we introduced into Barbados, and a type of small ladybird beetle called Cryptolemus. And the bottom left-hand photo shows what the Cryptolemus looks like. You will see it in the top left of the photo. You will see the actual beetle, small beetle. And if you look to the right, you will see an elongated white-looking thing with parts sticking off. That actually is the larval stage of the beetle. And that also is a voracious predator. So both of them feed on the mealybug and help to control it, both the adult beetle as well as the larval stage. And in the case of the pawpaw mealybug, again, we have examples of a parasitoid or a parasite and a predator. The top right one is again a tiny parasite or parasitoid, a small, very small wasp, which we introduced here from Puerto Rico, and it has done an excellent job in controlling the paw mealybug, and all in combination then with a locally occurring predator, which is in the uh, bottom right photograph, and it is a tiny fly, which voraciously preys on the eggs in particular of the mealybug pests and helps to control it. So those combinations have brought those two pests, very significant pests I might add, under excellent biological control in Barbados, and usually there is no need to do any further control. Right? Now, out there feeding on a whole range of other types of mealybugs are a range of different natural enemies, and you will see them there, photographs of them. Predators like the same Cryptolemus, the beetle Skimnus, green lacewing, which most people would be familiar with, is in the bottom left photo. There are predatory flies. You see there in the bottom middle photo, that red looking larva there is the larva of a predatory fly chomping into the mealybugs and destroying them. And that creature on the bottom right is actually the larval stage of the green lacewing. Again, it's a voracious predator and will attack many different insect species in your garden, and it should be conserved. Now, some other examples of mealybugs, again, there are a range of them, a whole number of them, are these Pharicia and Phenacoccus and Pseudococcus and Planococcus, a whole range, and they go on a number of species of ornamentals and fruit trees and even crops, even grass. Excuse me. So they have a wide host range, and you will see them on a number of your various types of garden plants. Now, another type of sucking pests that you will find out there are things called white flies. And as the name implies, they look like tiny white flies. When you see them on your plants and you touch the plant, you just see them fly off, these little white things flying off, right? And again, they basically suck sap from the leaves and twigs and buds and so of your plants. cause physical damage to the plant. But what is even more insidious is that these whiteflies tend to vector a whole range of plant diseases. Um, there's one species that we have here that can vector at least 30 different types of plant diseases. So you end up with from having one problem to two major problems, i.e. you get the physical problem on your plant, you get the associated uh, sooty mold, um, like other species of the sucking pest. And in addition to that, as if that was not bad enough, you get your problems with various types of plant diseases. And when these plants get these diseases vectored by things like these insects, like these whiteflies, often the only thing you have to do is just pull them up and destroy them, because there are not really any feasible, practical ways of controlling those virus diseases in your plants. All right. Now, with like the rest, there are simple ways of controlling these whiteflies. You can use things like the same soap and oil solution. Um, there are a range of different systemic insecticides like Aval and Actara and Humectin and so forth, that you can use to control them. You can use, if you're growing your plants in enclosures like greenhouses and so, you can use biological control. Like there's a very tiny wasp called Encarsia formosa, which works well in a greenhouse condition. Or in those greenhouse conditions, you can use things like sticky traps. They are yellow, um, glue coated or grease coated sticky traps, which attract the whiteflies, and they go onto them. They're stuck on there, and they can't get off, and they die there. Right now, in addition to what I showed there just now, which is a case of the sweet potato whitefly, there are other examples that we have here, ranging on all sorts of crops, all sorts of fruit trees. One that springs to mind of a plant that you would have in your garden, which is bay leaf. A number of people like to plant bay leaf and use it in their cooking at home. Bay leaf is often attacked by a type of whitefly called Cardin's whitefly. And again, it causes problems on the leaves, and you get the black sooty mold and so forth. But you can control it with things like the soap and oil mixture, and get pretty good control. So there are a whole range of different types of whiteflies out there. Again, if you're not sure what you're dealing with, please contact us at the Ministry of Agriculture, and we'd be very willing to help you with it. Right? Another type of sucking pest that we often deal with and we see in your gardens and on crops, on ornamentals and trees and so forth, are things called aphids. Now, these are small, soft-bodied insects. Some people call them plant lice or green bugs. And like the other ones that we had mentioned before, they suck sap from the stems and leaves and twigs and buds of your plants, and they cause distortion in the growth of them, shedding of the buds. You get a lot of honeydew and sooty mold. And like the white flies I just mentioned, some of these aphids are known to transmit or vector virus diseases from affected plants to healthy plants and cause more problems. Right? And some of the examples we have here in this particular slide of other species of aphid that we have in Barbados. The top left one, Aphis gossipii, you will see things like that on things like on cotton and beans and so forth. The bottom left one, if it's neri, a bright orangey type um, aphid, you will often find feeding on your plants, oleander plants. The top right one, Mysis persicae, again on a range of different types of trees and vegetables. The bottom right one, Toxoptera aurantii, you will find feeding on citrus in particular, right? So they feed on, again, like the previous ones, on a range of different plants and cause a series of different problems. Now, they too have examples of biological control out there in the environment, and the primary example of the biocontrol of these aphids is again a small wasp called Lysophlebus, and what it does, it deposits its egg into the aphid, and the egg will hatch into a tiny grub within the body of the aphid and begin to eat it out from the inside, and then it eventually becomes mummified. They look like small beigey brown balls on the plant, and you will see a photograph of them on the bottom left. And also you will see a small opening in one part of the aphid mummies, and this is through which the adult of the wasp will then emerge, look for a partner, mate, and start the process all over again. It's a very effective parasitoid of the aphid and gives it contributes well to the control of the aphid in the garden. In addition to that, you have a range of predatory insects that will feed on the aphids. And many of you will know of our local Bajan ladybird, a small orangey red ladybird. You see it there to the top. It's called Cyclonidus sanguinea, the top right. And the bottom left is the actual larval stage of that mealybug. So the two of them look quite different, and in many cases people think that you're dealing with two different types of insects, but no, you're dealing with just a different stage of the same insect. And in addition to that, you have things like hoverflies. You see in the bottom left photo, and as the name implies, this fly sort of hovers over the plant. You'll see it zipping from one side and then hovering like a helicopter. And it's actually looking for a place to lay its eggs. And the eggs hatch out into tiny maggots because it's a fly. And the photograph in the bottom middle, you will see that yellow, elongated yellow thing in the middle there is actually the larval stage or the maggot of the hoverfly busily chomping into an aphid and eating it. Very effective predator as well. All of them are out there in the environment. You don't have to do anything. Let them do their work. Now, a different type of an insect that basically comes under the broad heading of a sucking pest are things called thrips. And I must tell you that thrips is both singular and plural. It's one thrips, two thrips, okay? And these tiny soft-bodied insects as well, they don't actually suck the sap from the leaves or buds or so forth. What they do is they bite into the cells of the plant tissue, and when the sap oozes out, they will then drink that sap up. Okay, and what what they tend to do is cause silvering and bronzing of the leaves and the fruit, and they also cause distortion, severe distortion in some cases. Um, there are some vegetables that are so badly attacked um, by these thrips and so badly distorted that you all you have to do is just pull them up and throw them away. There isn't much you can do about it, right? Um, Now let me explain a bit about how these thrips work and the sort of life cycle that they go through. Let's start on the left hand side where you see the caption mark adult. So the adult female, after she has mated, will land on the plant and deposit an egg. Now what she does is actually cuts a tiny slit into the plant tissue, puts her egg inside there, and then the sap of the plant will ooze out and cover it, right? So just looking at the plant, you wouldn't know that the thrips egg is inside there. So in a day or two, the egg will hatch out and go into the first larval instar or first larval stage, which begins then to feed on the surface of the plant. It can feed on the leaves, buds. It can actually go into the bud as well, and feed inside there. And there are species of these thrips which can do quite a lot of damage to even things like orchids, and a number of our orchid growers at present even have a big problem with a newly introduced species of thrips. It's called Thrips parvispinus, the tobacco thrips. And it is giving them and a number of farmers a big headache in trying to control it. Anyhow, getting back to the life cycle. After the first instar larva has fed for a couple of days and goes into the second larval instar, which is feeding on the plant itself. It feeds again for a few more days. And when it is reached that end of that particular stage of its life cycle, it will either drop off or crawl off the plant and go down into the soil or into the medium that the plant is growing in, and then go into a initial resting stage called the propupa, and then a little later go into the full resting stage called the pupal stage. And it is from this stage then that the adult will then emerge in a few days to begin its life cycle all over again. So when you are treating your plants for thrips in particular, it is imperative to remember, excuse me, that you have to treat while the insect is on the plant, and also when the insect is in the soil or in the leaf litter or in the medium that the plant is growing in. You have to treat both parts, because if you don't, chances are you won't get any good control. You have to hit it at both stages, on the on plant stage and in the in soil stage. And usually when you do that, you will get pretty good control. All right, and this is what some of the damage that certain species of thrips cause. You see this sort of silvering appearance with these little black spots. They are the excreta from the thrips larvae when they're feeding on the leaves. You see that silvery appearance. I'm sure many of you would have seen when you're driving around examples of this on almond trees. You know, almond leaves and the trees tend to be nice and green. But in some times, especially during the dry times of the year, Some of these almond leaves tend to have a bronzish, silvery appearance, and it's quite striking. You can see it often from quite a distance off, and that is caused by one of these thrips. It's called the red-banded thrips, and that is what causes that damage on the almond leaves. The bottom photo, that horrible looking thing, is actually a pepper plant which has been done that atrocious damage by one of the thrips species called chili thrips. Right? Now, all is not lost. There are a number of insecticides that you can use, both systemic and contact, and both man-made and even natural or organic, right? And there are also a number of predators that will feed on the thrips in your garden as well. And examples of these insecticides are things like pyrite, which is a man-made type insecticide. And an organic alternative is a thing called aramite, which is a combination of clove and cinnamon oil, and works very well and is totally organic. You can also use your good old soap and oil mixture as well. Now, some of the natural enemies that are out there in your garden feeding and parasitizing and preying on the thrips are things like the minute pirate bug you see on the top left, the bottom left, the big eye bug, Geocoris species. There are even some species of thrips that are predatory. They feed on other thrips, and the top right photo shows a very bold black thrips, which is actually feeding on the pest thrips. You see the small, clear looking, the one in the middle and towards the left hand side. They're actually preying on them and feeding on them and controlling them. In addition to that, you have the green lace bug that I had mentioned before, the green lacewing. And there is even a species of parasitic fungus that will infect the thrips. This particular one is called Bovaria bassiana, and kill it. And it's pretty effective, especially in humid environments. Right? Now, and I think this is the last section dealing with the sucking pests. Another example that we have, again, not strictly speaking so much as a sucking pest, but similar to the thrips, are what you call spider mites. And these are usually reddish color or yellowish color, and they're small, almost microscopic. The most parts actually pierce the individual's plant cells. They cause a lot of speckling, bronzing, yellowing of the leaves. And when the populations are high, they can even cause the leaves of the plant to drop off, and you end up with a leafless plant, which you really don't want. Right? Some of the species of these spider mites can also produce small webs, like a spider, and which will coat the foliage and collect dust, make the plants look dirty as well. And again, they tend to be prevalent, like the rest mentioned before, during the dry season, right? So it's particular that you check your plants during the dry season for things like these sucking pests, including the spider mites and so forth, and make your control applications. All right. Now, some examples of mites that we deal with here. Red palm mite, which came into Barbados a few years ago, as the name suggests, it is mainly a pest of palms and coconuts. But fortunately in Barbados, it has not done the tremendous amount of damage that it has done in places like Trinidad and St. Kitts and other Caribbean islands. And we do not really have a big problem with it. I have never advocated people to spray insecticide against it because we have two tiny predators that feed on it and appear to keep it in pretty good biological control. So we don't want to kill them by using pesticide. However, there is a problem that we also get on coconuts, and this is caused by the coconut mite, Aeria garrulonis. And you will see many of you would have noticed on your coconuts, or you see the coconuts when you pass the road and you see the vendors selling coconuts, you will see this sort of brown scarring on the surface of the coconuts, and that is caused by this very tiny that elongated mite. It's called an areophyid mite. It's extremely small. You have to get a microscope to see it, and it feeds on top of the what you call the cap, which fits on top of the coconut. It feeds underneath there, and as the coconut grows and the tissues elongate, you see this scarring spreading all over the surface of the nut. And it can be very bad. It can reduce the size of the coconut. It can reduce the contents of the coconut, the amount of water that it has in, and even the amount of oil it can produce or coconut meat. So it is a pretty significant pest of our coconuts. Right? Now, there are, as I mentioned, a couple of predators that will feed on these mite species. The top right photograph will show you an example of a tiny, what we call a phytosid mite, attacking a pest mite and killing it. And there is also a predator, a very tiny ladybird beetle that attacks the mites and kills it quite effectively. And this ladybird beetle is very small. Again, it's about the size of a pinhead, but a voracious predator on the mites, right? And there are other things like a rove beetle, oligota, that will feed on it. You can also use a range of different miticides, things like numectin or pyrite, or you can use the organic alternatives, which I mentioned earlier, aramite, the mixture of clove and cinnamon oils. There are others you can use as well. There's even a wettable sulfur that can be used to control these mites, and it's very effective. Sulfur is very effective in controlling mites. Okay. In addition to that, there is also a species of Bovaria as well that can parasitize and kill the mites. You see that there on your on the left of the slide, and that photograph on the right shows a picture of the beetle that I mentioned earlier, the oligota, which is a predator of your mites out there in the garden. Right? Now, hoping that you are not really totally fed up with these sucking pests and so, I'll then change to another subject, which is the other types of pests that we find on our ornamentals, garden plants, and so forth. And many of you would have seen these when you looked at your leaves of various plants. You see these small wiggly looking trails just underneath the surface of the plant. And this is damage caused by one or more species of tiny fly. And these are referred to as the leaf miners. Now, That sort of damage is caused by when the adult fly, which you see to the bottom there, bottom left, lays her eggs into the leaf. The egg will hatch out into a tiny maggot, and the maggot will begin to then burrow under the surface of the leaf and tunnel and cause those wiggly tunnels all over the leaf. And in the process, it eats out the chlorophyll in the leaf. And sometimes the infestation is so severe that the leaf almost appears totally white and devoid of chlorophyll. So it can be a serious pest, and it can do a lot of damage on a range of different things, including things like onions and chives, and it can be a major problem on them. Right? And in addition to this, you have even some small species of moths which can cause similar damage. And an example of this is a small moth, a gracillarian moth, called the citrus leaf miner, which I suppose many of you might have seen on your citrus leaves, especially the young leaves. In particular, you will see them have a whitish or silvery appearance, and they often look crinkled. That is the citrus leaf miner feeding inside that leaf. Okay. Now, there are a range of tiny wasps and so forth that will feed on these various types of leaf miners in your garden. For example, the glyphus, Horisminus, they will go on the vegetable type leaf miners. Zygramosoma will go on leaf miners, like will feed on sweet potato leaves, for example, and so forth. So there are a whole range of them that will parasitize different types of leaf miners in your plants. Sometimes they can be quite difficult to control, and you should bear in mind too that in some cases, depending on the species that you're dealing with, you will often have to treat, like like how I mentioned earlier with the thrips, so you have to treat both when the pest is on the plant and then when the pest is in the soil. In some cases, some of these leaf miners, you have to do that as well, because in some of the species of these leaf miners, they will pupate in the soil, right? Some of them actually pupate within the mines or tunnels that they cause on the plant. However, some will come out and pupate either on the top of the leaf or will drop to the soil or in the medium and pupate in there. But there are a range of insecticides that you can use, things like leaf guard or triguard, different types of abamectins, and even imidacloprid. It all depends on the species that you're trying to control and the type of plant that it is infesting. Okay, another example of a pest that gardeners will have, and this is particular those people who grow orchids and even hibiscus, is what we call the dendrobium or hibiscus bud midge. And as the name suggests, it is a pest of the buds on these particular plants. What the top left hand photo shows a picture of the actual adult of the insect, Contorenia maculipennis, and it looks like a small mosquito, quite fragile. However, she lays her eggs into the buds of for example, the dendrobium orchids, or even in the young buds of hibiscus. And the maggots will hatch from those eggs and begin to feed inside those buds. and on the tissue. And what happens is that the buds will often become malformed, they don't open, or they drop off. And instead of, like, for example, when you're producing nice dendrobium orchids for the hotel industry or for um, different events, weddings, and that sort of thing, instead of getting a nice, lovely spray of about 15, 20 flowers, you will end up with a spray with one or two. And there isn't much you can do with that. You cannot sell it. All you can do is basically throw it away. Similarly, there are some persons who produce hibiscus flowers for the hotel restaurants. And in cases like that, this pest can become a serious problem because many of the buds will drop off so that they end up getting no flowers or very few flowers. Again, like the couple of the pests that I mentioned before, you should treat both the pest on the plant and in the soil to break the cycle completely and effect good control. Right? Now, a different type of pests or pests that we find from time to time out there, not only attacking fruit trees, but even things like ornamentals, for example, crotons. Sometimes your croton plants, you will see the inside of the stems are all hollowed out, and it makes the plant very subject to breakage, and it can kill the plants altogether. And in that particular instance, the problem is a type of worm, a carpenter worm, which is belongs to a family of moths called the Coccidae, and they actually bore into the crotons and hollow out the stems and cause all sorts of problems. In addition to those moth borers, as you would call them, and a classic case of a moth borer in Barbados is the major pest on sugarcane, which we have done work for many, many years, and which started in the early 1920s. So Barbados has almost had you could say Barbados has 100 years experience in dealing with biological control of insect pests. And there are very few people, very few countries, I can tell you, across the world that can boast that. Very, very, very few. And in that case, with the sugarcane moth borer, it has saved us millions upon millions of dollars, which would have normally had been lost to that pest. Okay. Now, in addition to the moth borers that I mentioned before, there are other types of borers, beetle borers in particular, that will go into bore into trees, the branches of trees, and cause all sorts of problems. And you see one example here. It's a green and yellow striped beetle with very long antennae, right? It's called a longhorn beetle. It's called Chlorida festiva. And that is what the right hand photo is actually what the larval stage or beetle grub stage looks like, which actually feeds well deep into the branch, and often it's very difficult to control. You can, in certain cases, just simply cut the branch off that is affected and burn it. Or in some cases, you can use excuse me, insecticides such as Actara, which will control the entry of the pest into the plant. All right. Now, one of the newer type pests that we have been dealing with on a range of different types of trees, Immortelle in particular, Willy Willy, is a thing called the Erythrina gall wasp. Tiny, very tiny wasps. You see them there on the top left photo. And they cause all sorts of gall-like growths on the leaves, and the young shoots and so are very twisted and deformed, almost like a cancerous growth. And that is caused by the feeding of large numbers of those tiny wasps in there, and causing all sorts of problems on those trees. Right? Okay. All right, let's leave the insects off now for a while and turn to a different section, the mollusks. And these are basically the snails and the slugs. And I guess most of you will be familiar with both types. There is the top left-hand picture is the infamous giant African snail, which most of you have dealt with in your garden. There's a much smaller species which can cause just as much or more damage to your plants, called Zacrisia. And then there are species of slugs, for example, Sloan slugs and the Cuban slugs, which can, as Beijing said, graze down their different types of plants and cause innumerable problems in your gardens. On all types of plants, whether they be crop plants, fruit trees, ornamentals, you name it. And the ways that you go about controlling them are a whole different set. You can destroy them physically, you can drown them, you can use various types of baits. And here the photo shows some examples like deadline pellets and blitzum slug pellets and so forth. Some of them contain a product called metaldehyde, which is very effective in controlling them. But if you have pets or livestock on your property, you should go with a different one that contains iron phosphate. And an example of this is one called Sluggo, which won't kill you or damage your pets, right? Two of the newer type pests that we have in Barbados, two examples are the avocado pest, avocado lace bug, that you see there on your left, and damage that was caused by a fungus and a beet bark beetle on golden apple trees and killed hundreds of them a few years ago on the island. And that basically, in a nutshell, is a sort of just a small idea of these types of pests that we deal with in the garden situation. There are many, 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 many more. And as I say, and I would like to reiterate, if you don't know what you're dealing with, you're unfamiliar with the type of pest that you're dealing with and how to control it, give us a call at the Ministry of Agriculture. You will see my contact number there. That's my direct line or my email address. And please feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so very much, Ian. That was a very, very, very informative and in-depth and expert presentation. And we really, really appreciate you taking the time to present to us today and to share your expertise on this area, you know, that is often a frustration to gardeners and maybe have caused quite a few of us at points in time to feel like if we want to give up. So thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Whilst you were whilst we were presenting, we've actually had a number of questions that have come in. So what we're now moving to the Q&A part. So what I will do is read out those questions for you to answer. The first question we have, which I think you touched on a little bit, is how can we treat leaf miners?
Yeah, there are different ways that you can treat them. Basically is by the use of insecticides. And there are a number of insecticides that you can get out there, some of which I have mentioned in the presentation, that they're basically systemic insecticides, which means that they go into the leaf, so that when the insect feeds on the plant tissue, it will take up a dose of the insecticide and be killed.
Okay, okay. And is there any option to treat them organically?
There are some organic products like neem, for example. You can get products like Neem-X or BioNeem, which can be used. Yeah, and sometimes the horticultural oils, which will work on the pupal stages, which often will come onto the leaf itself. But the thing with these leaf miners is that they are in a fairly well protected environment within the leaf itself. So in many cases, you don't have really much choice but to use a systemic insecticide.
Okay, thank you. And the next question related to that is, can you eat a plant leaf that has leaf miner trails in it?
Yes, you'll get a little extra protein, but there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay, no problem. The next question we have, do pile bugs harm the plants? Do pill bugs
Pill bugs are, let me just mention that pill bugs are really not insects. They are more closely related to crustaceans like crabs and so forth. They usually will feed and proliferate in areas where there is decaying organic matter. In other words, you will have like heaps of dead leaves or lawn clippings, that sort of thing. If old wood is resting on the surface of the soil, you'll see a lot of them are underneath there. They like cryptic environments, as you would say, where they can go and hide out of the sun and be in high humidity and that sort of thing. They love to feed inside those sorts of environments. So if you have those situations on your property, it's best mainly to get rid of them. Yeah, you know, so that there's less chance of the pill bugs breeding in there. However, in some cases, they can come from adjacent lots, as you might say. Some people might have a beautiful garden, and right next door to them there is an overgrown lot where the owner is not taking care of that property, and it provides a breeding area for a range of pests, including these pill bugs, which can then come onto your property. Right? And so in a case like that, we are not the source of the problem as such. You can use some insecticides to control them. Many of them, quite a number of them don't work. But things like, for example, we have found there's an insecticide called bifen, active ingredient bifenthrin, which can cause some degree of control.
Okay.
But I mean, some situations, a number of situations, people call me and they say, oh, they're coming into my house, and so, what can I do to kill them? I tell them, go and get your broom and sweep them out.
That's interesting.
Right?
Okay.
A no toxic alternative.
Yes, agreed. Okay, thank you. Next question is, other than picking, how would you get rid of slugs?
A very effective method that I found many years ago when I used to live in St. George was to go out at night with a what we call a Collins or a big knife, and just cut them in half, and it works. It kills them, and you do that for many nights in a row, and it tends to depopulate them over a period of time, and is very effective. Other than that, if people are a bit squeamish about that, there are a range of different baits that you can use that will contain either metaldehyde or iron phosphate. You can purchase them from your agri-chemical retailers. and use them.
Okay.
Or there are also liquid formulations of the metaldehyde. One which springs to mind is there it used to be called Slug It. Now it's called Slug Fest,
Okay.
which is a liquid formulation of the metaldehyde.
Okay, thank you very much. And how do you get under each leaf in a plant to administer sprays?
When you're spraying with your sprayer, you just simply turn the nozzle facing upwards. You know, your nozzle at the end of the lance will be facing downwards.
Yeah.
You just invert it.
Okay.
And you go all underneath the leaves.
Okay. Thank you. The next question we have that I'll combine: how can you protect watermelon and squash from bugs and pests?
That's a big question because there's a number of them that feed on either the leaves, even for example on the fruit itself. There are in addition to insect pests, there are even deficiencies that will cause problems on your for example, your squash. And so in a case like that, it's better to be more specific. If you have a problem, contact me at the Ministry of Agriculture, right? Or you can WhatsApp me at 230-8184 and send as many pictures as you like of the problem so that I will get a better handle of what you're dealing with.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a couple more questions. How do I protect my lettuces, cabbage, and okra leaves from leaf miners? I was told of something called neem oil, or steeped neem leaves in water for a couple hours. I think you mentioned that as well.
Yes, I mentioned this earlier that you could use that. Let's see. Leaf miner is not such a big problem on cabbage. It can be a problem on lettuce. Yeah. The other crop was what again?
Okra.
Okra.
Yeah.
Occasionally, yes, on okra. It depends too, and like for example, when you're dealing with okra, whether you is in the harvesting stage or whether it is just simply in the vegetative or growing stage. The type of insecticide that you use will depend very heavily on that, because all of these insecticides have what you call a days to harvest period. In other words, if you plant now, for example, for today, you have to wait X amount of days before you can use the okras, for example, because it takes that amount of time for the insecticide to be broken down or metabolized within the plant, and then cause no problems to people who might pick the okras and eat them, right? So if you adhere to that time, you should have no problem. And okras mainly are things that when they're bearing, you pick them like every other day. Right? And it's a very close window which you have to go in and use pesticides. But there are certain pesticides that you can use, particularly depending on the pest that you're trying to control, and depending on that day is the harvest period. But there are some of the insecticides, like for example, some of the synthetic pyrethroids, which have a very short window, and sometimes just 1 day or even 3 days, right? So you can choose which one you want to use to get control of what you're trying to control.
Okay, thank you.
And cabbage, again, is, as I said, not much of a problem with leaf miner. You get a whole lot of problems with other things like diamondback moth, for example. And again, that is a very difficult pest to control. But we could spend the rest of the evening talking about that.
Yes, yes. So we'll move on to the next question. How can we treat termites caused by using mulch?
They are, you mean the termites are on the tree itself?
I think it seems like the termites came with the mulch.
Oh, all right. A simple organic method of controlling them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can use things like various types of contact insecticides, like the same pyrethroids that I mentioned. Things like Decis, Sherpa, Karate, for example, you can spray onto the mulch and incorporate it in, as you would say, turn it and then spray again and turn it and spray again.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets into contact with the problem with the termites, or more organic method you can use is cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper, you can mix up a mix of two, two, 2 packs of cayenne pepper to 1.5 gallons of water, and spray all over the mulch.
Okay.
And incorporate it as much as possible.
Okay. Sounds like a great solution. Thank you. What causes leaf curl on leaves of green pea plants?
On leaf of what?
Green pea plants? Pea plant.
Green. You mean pigeon pea?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
It can basically be a leaf hopper.
Okay.
Sometimes you get that curling, and also it turns the leaf brown. It's often referred to as a hopper blast, or hopper burn. In a case like that, you again can use one of the quick knockdown pyrethroids, Decis, Sherpa, Karate, any one of them.
Okay, okay. And we have 2 more questions we're going to take. Can you simply cut off the leaves that are affected by pests? Would that be sufficient to address the pest problem in that particular plant?
Can you repeat that one? My dogs was barking, so in here you're too good.
No problem. So can we simply cut off the leaves of plants that are affected by pests? Would that be efficient enough to address the problem?
Yes, in many cases you can do that. But when you cut them off, I would suggest that you, if you can burn them in your area, but I know it's not really allowed to burn now. But anyhow, that was a very effective method. In addition to that, you can get an old bucket with some strong soap solution and just throw them in there and submerge them. Or you can simply put them in a clear plastic bag, emphasis clear, plastic bag, tie them out, leave them out in the sun for a week or so until they get really cooked before you dispose of them.
Okay, great. Thank you. And our final question, someone has here, our pear tree has this year a lot of rust-colored scarring on the fruit and brown spots on the leaves. This is not on the whole tree, just on the south side. Is this likely an insect or a fungus?
Most likely you're talking about 2 types of insects in that situation. But I mean, I can't see them for myself, but I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Let's deal with the leaves first. That browning, patches of brown and so on the leaves, is one of the pests that I mentioned here in the presentation, called the avocado lace bug. And you can easily control that with the same soap and oil mixture that I mentioned in the presentation. Okay. All right. The next one, where you get that brown scarring on the surface of the pears, is probably due to a species of thrips. It is probably the red-banded thrips, the same one that I mentioned that you will see on things like almond. And in a situation like that, again, yes, the same soap and oil mixture you can use, or there is another one that I mentioned called aramite.
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually go and buy from one of the agro retailers, which is a mixture of cinnamon and clove oils, completely organic, and
Mm-hmm.
that will control the thrips as well.
Okay.
But again, I must mention, when you're doing these sprayings, it's imperative to know where the pest is, i.e. on the back part of the leaf, the underneath of the leaf, or on the fruit or so that you can do effective control.
Okay, great. Thank you so much again. And that wraps up our presentation for this particular session. We are very eternally grateful for Mr. Gibbs spending time with us this Saturday when he could be with his family relaxing. So we thank you so much for taking the time. It was very informative, very educational. And we would like our participants to continue the conversation, to continue to ask your questions via our Facebook group page, the Victory Gardens University page, to keep the conversation going.
I am not into Facebook, so you'll have to send me on another way.
Yeah, so I was also going to say for Mr. Gibbs, we have posted his number in the chat section so that the participants can take a copy of his number and WhatsApp him. As he mentioned, you can send him a WhatsApp of your pictures and your questions so that he could assist you with any specific problems that you may have. So we will just we'll just spend a couple minutes very quickly to go through and remind you that Victory Gardens also has a number of products and services that we offer, including seedlings, and which again you can contact us for further details. We also provide planter boxes, various types and sizes for your garden, and we also do garden design. So if you have a space that you're not quite sure what to do with, you can reach out to us on Facebook or telephone number 261-8408, and we can transform that lot into a productive home gardening space. And that brings us to the end of another session of the Victory Garden University. Again, we thank you very much to our presenter, Ian Gibbs. Thank you very much for our participants for sticking with us throughout this session, and we'll see you again at the next one, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you and goodbye.